Entheogen is translated as generating the divine within, meaning these substances are used to facilitate spiritual realizations, feelings, and meanings, and often used as supplements to ceremonial rites. An entheogen interacts with the same brain chemicals that are active during a spiritual or mystical state of consciousness. There are a lot of them: LSD, magic mushrooms, psilocybin, peyote, the new CBs, 2CB, 3CB, etc., ayahuasca, and nearly countless others. Most psychedelics are serotonergic psychedelics, meaning they primarily act upon the serotonin neurotransmitter. These are the classic psychedelics: LSD, psilocybin, mescaline, and others that are plant-based rather than lab-based. Yes, I know, they are all laboratized to some degree. Even mushrooms and peyote need some preparation, but the classics are not generated, isolated, or bonded purely in a lab like the CBs. The classic psychedelic induces intense immersion into feelings often perceived as enlightening and revelatory rather than confusing or psychotic. Hallucinations and synesthesia, the crossing of senses, such as hearing colors and seeing sounds, are common features, and revelatory perceptions are also consistent with the serotonergic psychedelics. Essentially, a psychedelic state can be achieved organically by meditation, conditions of intense deprivation, or other perception-altering states of mind or experience. The psychedelic state is the literal term for an enlightening, revelatory, transcendental state of consciousness. The classic psychedelic experience is characterized as entheogenic. The psychedelic state is the literal term for an enlightening, revelatory, transcendental state of consciousness. The classic psychedelic experience is characterized as entheogenic. The non-classic, newer non-psychedelic drugs are mixes of entheogenic qualities combined with qualities of confusion and mild psychosis, ketamine, or simple superficial pleasure feelings like ecstasy. I don't know if the term tripping somehow evolved from the neurochemical tryptamine or not, but tryptamine seems to be an essential component of the entheogenic experience. Entheogens activate or interact with tryptamine. In the documentary DMT, The Spirit Molecule, Dennis McKenna referred to the God detector, a part of the brain that has the function of processing and experiencing the mystical and spiritual. Anytime a spiritual or mystical state of mind is experienced, tryptamine is present. Tryptamine may be the required tool used by the mind to activate and experience the spiritual or mystical. The truly spiritual exists beyond the material phenomena and cannot be perceived with material senses any more than a quasar in space over 100 million light years away can be seen by the naked eye. Whether it is perceived or not, it exists. With the right telescope and mathematical formula, that quasar can be detected, imagined, and photographically conceptualized. Whatever is perceived is not the actual thing, but it is close to the real experience as can be had. While entheogens and tryptamine may not facilitate the actual real God experience, it may be the nearest thing to it and still inspires us and gives us a glimpse that motivates us to search unceasingly for it. The Buddha supposedly told us that once a person becomes aware that enlightenment is a possibility, it is only a matter of time before they become enlightened. The meaning here is that once exposed to the truth or to enlightenment, you settle for nothing less and feel compelled to pursue it until achieving it. The personal and irrefutable spiritual experience will inspire and motivate anyone and everyone who experiences it to yearn for it. The price of enlightenment is dedication and endurance of the frustrations of knowing of it but not attaining it. In other words, suffering. We are paying the same price either way. If we're pursuing enlightenment, at least our suffering is a means to an end. The moment people become aware that enlightenment is a possibility, it is the best and worst day of their lives. The best because it is the beginning of liberation, and the worst because it is no longer possible to be at peace without it. Tryptamine acts as a serotonin-releasing agent. It intensifies serotonin release and possibly enhances its qualities, turning up its volume. Serotonin is our happy neurochemical. Tryptamine causes more serotonin to be released, but also may restructure it, enhancing its quality to an entirely higher octave. Tryptamine activates magnitudes of joy that cannot be related to. A psychedelic is a drug that features a visual and auditory delusions or hallucinations, strong physical features, and magical thinking and perception, believing, accepting, or sensing that circumstances have a significant and positive meaning. One way to define psychedelics is to define what they are not. They do not produce a narcotic high, which is typically singular or minimal in its effects and feelings. Narcotics affect a set of physiological mechanisms that are specific to its own resonances. For example, a downer makes us feel sedated and slow. Psychedelics are more comprehensive and concentrated mostly within mental and emotional perceptions rather than specific bodily sensations or moods. For example, opiates are depressants, meaning they depress or slow down the nervous system, which results in slower or depressed physiology. By contrast, amphetamines are stimulants, meaning they stimulate or speed up the nervous system. Faster breathing, heart rate, blood circulation, etc. Both a depressant and stimulant affect mood by triggering physiological sensations of peace and tranquility or enhance focus and moods of urgency, respectively. Psychedelics do not rely simply on physiology to alter mood. They directly interface with emotion to induce high quantities of perception. Perception is an octave higher than mood. Mood is how you feel, but perception is what you think. Psychedelics do interact with the physiological nervous system, no doubt, but it depends largely on the individual if his or her own body will translate these signals into speed up or slow down messages, or even a myriad of features in between. Psychedelics affect the brain-mind by enhancing a person's natural disposition and constitution. A person's natural constitution and disposition becomes more pronounced. Whatever you fear will be terror. Whatever you like, you'll love. Classic psychedelics vary. A psilocybin trip is more dissimilar than similar to an LSD trip. Why they are much more similar to each other than a non-psychedelic state of mind is to a psychedelic one, they are different in potency, qualities, character, and personality. For example, I personally felt a psilocybin trip of mushrooms was more frivolous than LSD. There was lots of silliness, laughing and joking, and the visuals were dynamic, shiny, bright, pronounced, and detailed, but not ethereal. LSD made things dynamic and ethereal or surreal. Again, this is not to suggest they are simply weaker or stronger than one another. They have different characteristics and personalities. Some differences are subtle, while some, depending on the drug, are pronounced and significant. In other words, no psychedelic trip is exactly like any other psychedelic trip. It is not sensible to address and elucidate on every available psychedelic, so I apologize if I pass over the one that you feel is the one that needs to be addressed. Hopefully, this more comprehensive and inclusive text will cover the main ones and the more consistent features to effectively explain and elucidate for the novices on the psychedelic experience, the good and the bad. Since LSD has many of the same features and similarities as the others and even exceeds them, I suggest reading that section for more details on the psychedelic experience. In general, the psychedelic experience is a potentially mind-expanding or mind-contracting experience. If it's a good trip, you'd consider it mind-expansive, and if it's a bad trip, you'd consider it mind-contracting. The takeaway and relevant feature of psychedelics is that they are profoundly philosophical, and experiences tend to provide a before and after perception of self and reality. Good or bad, the full psychedelic trip will change you. I do not think it possible to be unaffected by the spectrum of feelings and perceptions that defy and transcend what we normally feel and perceive. It pushes the envelope, to be sure. Therefore, there is a before tripping state of being and thinking and an after tripping one. There is a controversial debate over the realness of the experience. Is it a drug-induced and non-real experience, or are the experience, perceptions, and feelings genuine? The only part of the trip that could be considered unreal would be the perceptions of events, i.e. what they mean, but not the events themselves. If I am walking down a path and see a snake on the trail and perceive danger, I have a fear reaction and my heart beats faster. Suddenly I realize the snake is actually a piece of rope lying on the path. Does this mean my fear and reaction to it were false? Absolutely not. I either feel embarrassed or satisfied at my handling of what I thought was a dangerous threat. I now have an opportunity to learn some things about myself, improve my reactive mentality by being more centered and more calm, and by realizing I reacted sensibly. It may add to my self-confidence. The snake was an illusion, but I am changed by the brief experience one way or another. The debate over whether the psychedelic trip is real or fictional is rational, but not very valuable. What you experienced and perceived was real, and that's that. The humbling realization that the snake was a rope and not a snake does not change the realness of the perceptions and reaction I had. It is convenient to dismiss the psychedelic perceptions as merely illusion or delusion. Yet it changes you. The effects of the experiences linger and take on varying qualities over time and in hindsight. Whether you use your conscious mind to focus or study the trip or not, your subconscious does, and it will have a new version of its model of the world compared to before. Our personalities and characters are the sum total of our experiences over the spans of our lives. Rules apply if psychedelic experimentation is considered. Number 1, can you find a healthier, more organic way of expanding your mind? Number 2, do not do it often or multiple times. Moderation is an axiom of life. Excessiveness is never good. Number 3, be sure to create the optimum environment, location, people, timing, etc. And number 4, normal doses yield the best experiences. Moderation is an axiom of life. Number 5, respect the experience and hopefully it will respect you. Acknowledge and honor its ability and power. 6, eat well and take vitamin supplements well prior. 7, rest before and after. Psychedelics are very depleting and have toxins. Stomach and intestinal issues are common. Cramps, nausea, joint tension, muscle fatigue, and soreness is common. And appetite is dramatically impacted. 8, do not take the psychedelic experience for granted. It is serious and there are many ways to expand your mind and to experience profound realizations without using drugs. Psychedelics are a little more than convenient shortcuts to life awareness experiences. And what do we know about shortcuts in life? They always come at proportionate costs. I have met many people who never tripped and get it on the bus, and even more people who tripped a lot and definitely do not get it and on the bus. Andrew Shulgin died today. He was 97 years old. Shulgin introduced MDA and the CB drugs, 2CB, etc., to the world. He and his wife, Anna, authored several books on the therapeutic value of these drugs. Fecal and Thecal were the 2 books they authored and detailed their experiences and work with these drugs. The men and women who pioneered exploration into psychedelics for therapeutic purposes have been predominantly experienced, scientific, mature men and women. Timothy Leary, Ken Kesey, Hunter Thompson, Thomas Wolfe, and Ram Dass, aka Richard Alpert, are 60s icons who were intensely creative, intelligent, and scientific individuals who did more than spawn a countercultural revolution associated with flowers, hippies, and music. These individuals were progressive thinkers and psychonauts who could not ignore the value of catharsis through experience and consciousness alteration. People of the 60s were not rebellious because they wanted to resist established paradigms or thought. They were passionate about the truth they had been exposed to and felt strongly enough about them to endure and persist in them in spite of the establishments rebelling and resisting against them. Men and women who are willing to put themselves at risk and discomfort in an attempt to bring realizations to humanity are brave and dedicated. Alexander Shulgin was not on a mission to create, discover, or propagate a psychedelic drug. He, Rick Strassman, DMT, and Albert Hofmann, discoverer of LSD, were practical men, intellectually raised by Western science and education. All were PhDs. Their discoveries are powerfully influential and provide perspectives into psychiatry, philosophy, pharmacology, and spirituality that are integral components to modern psychiatry and behavioral science. Modern psychonauts who use chemicals to enhance their psychonetics stand on the shoulders of these giants. Sigmund Freud earned the title of being the father of psychotherapy and analysis by realizing theories that were unprecedented and undiscovered. His protege, Carl Jung, stood on his shoulders and refined psychoanalysis by synthesizing the science of the mind with myth, legend, spiritual philosophies, and the concept of the archetype. As a contemporary behavioral practitioner, I find little use for conventional psychoanalysis as Freud presented it, but tremendous value in the more evolved version of it by Jung. I do not use Freudian science for the same reasons I do not use candlelight to read by. I have access to electric light, so I use it. Candlelight is not improper or faulted at all. Electric light, like Jungian psychology, is a more refined and effective tool than its predecessor. It brings more into focus as it has a wider spectrum of range. My gratitude goes out to these men and women of the psychonetic field, as well as Albert Einstein, Stephen Hawking, Carl Sagan, Francis Crick, and James Watson for their same intensity and dedication to bringing us to new horizons of knowledge and insight that permit us to view our existence from a wide angle. I cannot help but see God in the details of physics, genetics, cosmology, and chemistry. It's hard not to get a rush from reading their works and discoveries. I encourage us all to do our conscious growth organically, sans chemicals, but we cannot ignore the wide-angle view we have through these pioneers of science. It is easy to be inspired by their commitment and dedication.